But then I realized having equity was one thing, but the banks don't want to continue to lend against a pot of gold. So you need to generate income. And in the back of my head, I always wanted property. I wanted to do some land banking. I knew the areas I was investing in, whether it was a 10 or a 20-year play, I could invest in areas that were going to be worth money one day. Hello, hello, hello. It's not where we start, ladies and gentlemen. It's where we finish. I'm Anthony Gafa, and you're watching Unfiltered with Gafa. Today we're going to talk about when is the right time to finally make that switch away from residential property. You might have 2 or 3 residential properties and they're starting to do the job for you. Year on year, they're growing by 5% on average. The rental returns are good but not great. The rents go up annually. But you've still got a lot of overheads with them. You've got land rates, you've got some other bills that come with them, whether it's strata and all the other bits and pieces that come with it. And you've heard people talking about the big boys or the big girls, the big investors, they dabble with commercial. The bottom line is, with commercial, you've got minimal expenses. The tenant will pay all the outgoings, from land rates, the water usage, they'll pay the management fees. They cover everything, insurances. So it does make a lot of sense. Sometimes if you don't buy well, the growth can be not as lucrative as residential, one would say. But the other side is, when you get a commercial tenant, they could lock in for 5 or 10 years, so the security is there, although they can go broke. But 7% returns is what you can expect, 6 to 7% returns on a commercial investment. So having a little bit of an offset, sometimes resi grows more, sometimes commercial has a better return, typically. You just need to know where you're at within your journey. And this is where I say go knocking on the door of an expert, a property expert. Lay your scenario out, how old you are, when you're looking at retiring, the type of risk you're willing to take. Do you still need more equity? Have you got enough equity? How do you increase your income? Are you leaning on commercial property because it's going to generate income and it's going to allow your property portfolio to grow? Do you want to come in with a lesser of a deposit? Do I need 30% to get into commercial? Is there still such thing as a lease doc? Will the bank recognize the lease is in place? And I'm not going to go into it too deep. That's an episode in itself. But this is talking about the switch. When is the timing right to go from resi to commercial? Because when you look for advice, whether it's listening to a podcast or listening to people who are selling you properties, like an agent who might favor commercial or an agent that might favor resi, they're going to push their own products. So what do you believe? A buyer's agent, some specialize in commercial, some specialize in resi. They're going to push their own products. Some do both. Some actually listen to the scenario you're laying on the table and they will offer you the right advice. So which direction do you go? Well, what you really need to understand first and foremost, where you need to get to. Because you might be investing in a resi portfolio and you're close to retiring and you're going to offload one property and you just want to live on whatever money's left over. And there's going to be a surplus of funds. That's enough for you. You may want to have an income of $1 million a year. And it doesn't matter how many residential properties you got. It's going to be very difficult to hit that number. You may have a timeline. In the next 4 years, I need to reach a number. I need to have an income of $1 million a year. How do I achieve that? I've got 4 residential properties, all valued at X amount, Y amount. How many do I need to offload to buy a commercial asset that's going to generate the income annually that's going to allow me to retire? Everybody is different, which is why I always say focus on what you need at the end of your journey. Understand that number. How much debt do you need to wipe out to be financially free? How much debt do you need to wipe out to be able to invest in an area that's going to be your play? What do I mean by that? Generating an income of commercial property, it's not tax-free. It's not your primary place of residence. So getting that number that you need is a strategic play, which means you need to understand your end vision. You need to speak to an advisor if you haven't done it before, if you can't crunch the numbers. But this is the time when you really need to sit down. Don't leave it too long, because you might be thinking, I'm getting all this equity, life is good. But there's a time when you need to offload to generate the income, because you don't want to work forever. There is a time when you need to have less equity, load up on debt to get the income that you're looking for, and to be able to sell down some debt at the end of your journey. So that timeline is crucial. Speaking to an expert that advises people on the same journey that you're going is definitely the key. A commercial asset, consistent income, higher returns, but when is the right time to make the switch? So personally, how did I go about this journey? Well, my first and only option initially really was to buy a house. I bought a property, I bought a granny flat, I then did it again, bought a house, granny flats, back in the day. And I did that until I had enough equity. I kept on doing the typical investment strategy of just buy a house and put a flat out the back. But then I realized having equity was one thing, but the banks don't want to continue to lend against a pot of gold. So you need to generate income. And in the back of my head, I always wanted property. I wanted to do some land banking. I knew the areas I was investing in, whether it was a 10 or a 20-year play, I could invest in areas that were going to be worth money one day. So there was a switch required. I then converted to commercial quite early. And then I had a formula where I'd convert commercial, which I will cover in one of the episodes. Buy commercial at a square meter rate because it's suitable for a certain type of scenario, whether it's warehousing or storage or whatever that may be. And then upgrade the asset class. So basically you're buying storage area, you upgrade storage to an office space, to retail, to restaurants, because the square meter rate continues to go up and up, and you can capitalize on the change of use, not just for evaluation, but the value per square meter that rent return is expected. So the rental returns would be a lot greater. These are the little strategies within each individual property, and commercial lends itself to that, to improvements and upgrades. By putting a commercial tenant in place with a favourable lease, for me, enhanced the value of a property. So I was still getting my portfolio to grow in value, but I was appreciating the greater rental returns on commercial property. In the background, I was doing land banking. So there was a cycle. Residential got me in. It allowed my portfolio value to rise. I then went over to commercial because I wanted to see some income. I enhanced the income by doing some sort of improvements. And in the background, again with the equity, I invested in land banking opportunities. And I just didn't let sleeping dogs lie. I still improved those properties as well. You need to be an active investor. You need to ensure you're always working your properties to have them work for you. I remember hearing from a wise old man once, what you earn's not that important, it's what you do with it. And it makes a lot of sense to me. It's not what you earn, it's what you do with it. Be sure to follow me on I am Anthony Gafa on all my socials, and my podcasts can be viewed on Spotify, YouTube, Apple Podcast, and all leading podcast platforms.